Hey guys, doing a quick review of Rogue One for you from the Dunes of Death Valley. So, the simple question is, did I enjoy the film? Answer, yes. However, there are issues with it both plot-wise and just from a fan service point that I'm not wild about. But let's start with general, just like, alright, it's the story that we all actually are like, oh, duh, as far as a prequel story goes for Star Wars, this is the obvious one of how they got the Death Star plans. And I think the setup is fairly strong. I like the idea of, oh, that one concept that we all saw as a plot hole being that very obvious weakness in the Death Star as kind of the middle finger from Galen Erso, the military weapons development Imperial guy. Sorry, walking up dunes. Tough stuff. That's why I stayed stationary. And I think that that's great, and I love the relationship between him and Orson Krennic, played by Ben Mendelsohn. In general, like Ben Mendelsohn, Mads Mikkelsen, like everybody is strong. In the Rogue One camp, Donnie Yen is a favorite of mine because he's one of those characters that we really haven't seen before. He's not a Jedi. He's not just like a standard person. He's a believer in the Force, and he kind of has that Zatoichi quality to him of the blind, faith-based swordsman. The other character from the Rogue One side of things that I really like is K2SO, voiced by Alan Tudyk. He's snarky, he's sassy, he's condescending. He's something we haven't seen in a droid. The fact that he's a reprogrammed Imperial droid is also kind of cool. Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones, and Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna, like, they're fine. They have the general, like, we don't see eye to eye, and they're strong characters in that right, but I don't think they actually were given a ton. I felt overall like characters could have been given more to be working with, and I think some of that just stems from us feeling like we needed set pieces all the time. There's the part of me that was wondering if Baze, the character of Baze, who's Chirrut, Donnie Yen's character, and Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker, couldn't have been combined into a single character, because it would have made for relationships across characters a lot stronger, and we would have had a lot less exposition necessary, because when people are friends, they speak in shorthand. And I think that that would have been very cool for Felicity Jones to have known this Baze Saw Gerrera character, and for Saw Gerrera Baze to have known Chirrut. So there's like that dynamic, and then you've got Cassian Andor knowing K2SO, and then you've got Bodhi, who's kind of the outlier, but knows Galen Erso. So there's that link, which would obviously draw him to Jyn, and I feel those components would make it for, I don't know, it's just like a bunch of strangers all being drawn together. I get it, for the sake of the rebellion is fine and fun, but for me, I feel like if we had gone a little less set piece crazy, or taken just like a little more time with things, would have been stronger. As far as the visuals go, this is, I mean, it feels like a Star Wars film. It looks like a Star Wars film. It's that worn future that we're so familiar with, specifically from the original trilogy. There are some components that feel a little off, like Grand Moff Tarkin. I know that everyone is like, oh man, the CGI, like, we managed to reconstruct his face, but he's not perfect. And I know this is a gripe of like, Lucasfilm tried. Yes, but they could have very easily presented him as a hologram, and then we would never have had an issue of like, oh, I'm taking a little bit out of this. Speaking of being taken a little bit out of this, the fan service would always pull me out. Like when they're on Jeddah and they run into the bar fighters whose names I am forgetting from Mos Eisley Cantina, and they encounter them. It's like, okay, you did it, haha, it's nice. Also, it's worth noting they have had a rough run because this movie takes place like moments before episode 4 starts. So they left Jeddah right after it was obliterated, then got into that fun little skirmish with Obi-Wan, and one of them lost their hands. So like they've had a rough run. But yeah, the encounter of them, Tarkin felt necessary, but like the C-3PO R2-D2 shot, it's like, okay, I guess they're in every single one, but it felt really forced. Another appearance that just initially didn't jive with me, but then the last like 40 seconds of their screen time is Vader. I think those last 40 seconds, and like people will say like, oh no, if you see Rebels, like Darth Vader's a badass, right? But we haven't seen Darth Vader be a badass in this capacity on screen before. And so that's why it's so cool and rewarding, and that's what we wanted to see in the prequel films, as opposed to whiny Anakin. So that part's great, but that first scene with Krennic, and that pun of "don't choke on your aspirations," that rubs me kind of like C-3PO Attack of the Clones pun-tastrophe. So like it's just a little cringy. I know there are some people who are like, no, it's great, but for me that was one of those like, oh god, come on guys, like let's make him just be a badass and like choke him and just go on about his way. Like one could argue that it's because he's toying with Krennic, but yeah, back to Krennic and Galen Erso. I've started to say that, but I'm rambly because I'm rambly. I wanted one more scene with their relationship because they're very obviously two characters who are ideologically on different sides, and this is a civil war. It's Star Wars, and this is the first time that we've seen sort of characters interacting in that capacity where they're like, oh, how's Lena? And there's very clear distrust, but they want to trust one another, and they do have a history with one another. So I think that that's fascinating, and we just needed, I've said it, we needed more of that. Then as far as I've talked aesthetics, I've talked characters, I've talked relationships, plot, there are minor things in the plot. Like I feel like we could have dealt with one like less set piece with, oh no, and they're going in at the same time with the rebellion going in when Cassian is supposed to be killing Galen, but then because Krennic shows up, then he's potentially going to die anyway, but then the rebellion showing up, they inadvertently kill Galen or somewhere in that skirmish, which that serves as a motivator for Jyn, but then she's rejected and then she goes off on her own. Like there are a lot of moving pieces that I feel like could have been reduced. And even then I feel like just getting message enough should have been, we don't need Galen or something of that capacity. I feel like we had too many moving pieces. Why did I walk up this hill? Because I'm fighting light. But I think overall it's a good film. Michael Giacchino, who did the music, this is the first Star Wars film without John Williams. And I feel like he managed to capture the brass and triumph and majestic nature that Williams tends to strive for in a Star Wars film, but the Rogue One theme, it felt within the universe, but it felt its own, but it was still tied in, so that's pretty damn impressive. Is there anything else I'm forgetting? I don't think so. I don't think so. So, is the film fun? Yes. Is it flawed? Yeah, a little bit. I think it falls into the same sort of camp that I put episode 7, where there are a lot of moments that are exceptional, and I think they nail the tone and aesthetic of the piece. Sometimes it does feel very like we needed to jigsaw this, or like assembly by committee. Because, like, this is the point where Cassian needs to have a change of heart. And you're like, I don't feel like we've earned that. Like, nothing was said or nothing specifically happened that facilitated those sorts of moments. But that's the moment where it needs to happen, so it's happening. But yeah, so I'm gonna cut my ramblings because I've spent 10 minutes wandering the dunes. Oh, I just remembered, and I know I'm fighting light on this one, but Disney was sort of pitching this as a standalone film, and it is so not. Just in the fact, like, if you aren't familiar with the original trilogy and how it starts, this film's ending is so remarkably unrewarding because you are like, who's the woman in white? Do I know her? Should I know her? But if you ended the film on Mon Mothma or some sort of speechy thing of showing how there's going to be hope, I understand for the fan service factor, like, it's absolutely great, but from a like standalone individual film, it is a weird way to end it, but it does, from the prequel standpoint, like, transition you perfectly into A New Hope. So there's that weird little factor that is worth also taking into consideration. So those are my ramblings on Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. There are more videos from me over there, and maybe a subscribe button or two. Thank you all for watching my Dune-like ramblings from Death Valley, and I will, just wanted to give you those thoughts, despite the fact that I have been on vacation. You're all wonderful people, and have a happy new year.